Hello, everyone. Welcome to Health 180 with Carion Fenn on Rogers TV. May 3rd to the 9th is Mental Health Awareness Week, a time to educate and increase awareness. My guest today is Renes Soetens, father of Emily, a beautiful young lady gone too soon. Rene joins me to talk about Emily's drug addiction and hope his loss could help save someone you care about. Welcome back to our show, Rene.
Nice to be here, Carion. It's always tough to remember Emily, but on the other hand, hopefully some good can come out of the loss by sharing her story.
Yes, I think it will. COVID-19 has kept all of us isolated. The use of drugs and alcohol has increased. In a survey by CAMH done in 2020, nearly half of the respondents indicated that their substance abuse has increased during COVID-19. What's your thoughts on drug addiction as we go through this pandemic?
Well, it is certainly there. Emily's problem, I think, to a great degree, resulted from an idle mind, shall we say? Mm-hmm. And that was a result of, I guess, her having lost her employment. And so she's sitting at home. She lost her employment, I think, never told, but because of her drug addiction. And when she sat at home, it just got worse. And I think that's what's happening now. People are at home because of the COVID scenario, I presume. And idle mind leads to the next thing. And where those people are prone to drug addiction or to the use of drugs, even in a recreational point of view, because they've got so much idle time, they've got more recreational time.
Yes. So I can't imagine losing one of my children, and we're sorry for your loss. How have you and your family been coping without Emily?
Well, it's been a couple of years now, January of 2019. So there's been some time, and time is partially a healer, to be fair. It's a slow process, because we do, especially every night on the news, we watched a show, in fact, last night, talking about drug addiction across Canada and the problems of particular British Columbia but the opioid addiction. And every time you see one of these news articles, it brings you back. So you can't get away from it. You'd like to say, if we can only forget this, but there are stories running rampant everywhere. And one of the nice things about Emily and our recovery, shall we say, is her friends. Some of them were part of the problem, but many of them were not. And we're just so thrilled with communication that we've been able to develop and improve upon with her friends to share memories, share fond thoughts. Those things are all really helpful, I think, for all of us in the healing process. So we've tried not to go into a cave and hide. We've been out very publicly trying to talk about our story and share the story. And it's amazing how that story is helpful, because you don't know about these people until they say to you, "Are we ever glad you spoke up? Our daughter, our son, our brother, they have a problem."
So looking back, I know you mentioned in regards to her losing her job, but I just wanted to find out, when you look back, is there one thing you believe that started Emily's path to addiction? And what would that one thing be, if you could point to one thing?
Well, hers was not a recreational path. She really hurt or broke her ankle and was prescribed opioids to deal with the pain. That was how she got into the drug addiction. And she managed to fight that off after a period of time. When she was on her own, I guess, she did have a boyfriend who was really a very nice guy, and I don't know the history of why they separated, but she obviously discovered that she had to do something about it, and she did. She solved the problem, and then came down with thyroid cancer, and they put her back on the drug. Well, the worst thing a drug addict can have is, drugs once you've been off it. Well, they put her back on it. And so it was a medical journey rather than a recreational journey.
Yes.
So once you're addicted, I guess medical and recreation kind of all blend together.
Yes. And we hear quite often about individuals who are prescribed medication and it leads to an addiction. Let's go back to where we left off in our last interview. Take us back to when Emily returned home on that Monday. What happened next?
Well, she had been out on a rehab program and had obviously come out of that program, came to our house to live, at least for a few days, to help her get over it. She did have a place of her own, but we decided it was better she stay with us, at least for a few days. But she had a car and she had the freedom to go to her house and so on. It's hard to know, but I think some of the friends who were party to her addiction contacted her, happy to see that she was now incommunicado or available to communicate with, and they started the communication. And in a matter of 2 days, I guess her addiction being relatively new to being under control, the temptation just got to her. The isolation, I think the challenges, she had run up a significant amount of debt. And now that she was home, she had to worry about that debt. And she still didn't have a job because, of course, she had lost it. And so I think the stress of what she was facing, combined with the temptation of her friends, not that they were calling her and saying, Emily, we're going out partying, you want to join us? But, it brought back the memories. And I guess Emily decided in the draw of the drug worked. She was I was taking her actually to a rehab. I guess the program has a Tuesday night meeting every Tuesday. So I was taking her to the first one following her coming out on the Monday. And in that, she went home to get changed. And I said, Emma, I'll pick you up, be there in 5 minutes. We only live 5 minutes away from where she lives. And I got to her house before she did. And yet she left 10 minutes before I did. So right away, it was very evident that she'd stopped and somewhere picked up whatever it was she picked up, and she was back on the drugs. And on the Wednesday, I took her, it was evident, at least in my opinion, it was evident on Tuesday that she must have taken something, denied it to the hilt, typical drug user. Wednesday, it was quite clear that she had taken a drug, and shortly thereafter, it was over. She had, whatever she had acquired had fentanyl in it, and the end result when the autopsy was done was that there were no other drugs in her system, only fentanyl.
Only fentanyl. So was this at her house? How did you know that she passed away?
At our house. I came home, and she was gone. Well, gone. Yeah, I would say she was gone. Obviously, the emergency response team showed up and kind of brought her back on life support. But that life support, that's all it was. She was gone.
Was she in the hospital?
When the life support was stopped, yes.
Okay. So she had an episode at home and then she was taken to the hospital?
Yes. Yeah. But at the hospital, they kind of told us that it was unlikely, that she had a very heavy dose. They had her on life support with the hope that given a day or two, it might work its way out. But that was not to be.
That was not the case. So how long was she in the hospital for?
The hospital was great. I got to tell you, the support at Ajax Pickering was spectacular.
So what was your wife with you when she had the episode?
No, June was at home at the time, and she was taking Emily out shopping, and I guess she knocked on Emily's bedroom door. Emily, I guess, was non-responsive, still alive. So June said, "Well, I'm going shopping without you," and called me, and I said, "I'll be home in half an hour." So, when I came home, I found her. So in that window, we think she'd obviously taken it before June had left the house, but anyway.
I'm sorry for your loss. That can't be easy to actually experience. But I'm so grateful that you are talking about it, because there are other families that are going through similar things that you experience, and it's always important when you hear what other people are going through. What's one thing you can say to another dad watching his daughter struggle with addiction?
Well, I guess support, encourage. We could have done more earlier on. You kind of say, ours was not a 17-year-old who wasn't listening to us. Emily was 39. Mm-hmm. So at some point as an adult, you have to say to your kids, like somewhere along the line, you need to be responsible for your actions. Mm-hmm. But I think that you really need to be supportive.
Yes. We're going to continue this conversation when we come back. We're watching Health 180 with Carion Fenn and Rogers TV. We'll be right back.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Van Bilsen for Photos and Travel, where we bring the world to your doorstep. Traveling during this pandemic is virtually at a standstill. However, thanks to Rogers and YouTube, my new show, Photos and Travel, is heading into its second season. Join me for a new episode every month when we get together and explore exotic locales around the world. Check local listings for dates and times, or search Jonathan Van Bilsen's Photos and Travel on YouTube.
Welcome back to Health 180 with Carion Fenn and Rogers TV. We're talking about drug addiction with Rene Soetens, a dad who lost his daughter. Can continue what you were saying in regards to what you would say to a dad who's watching his daughter struggle with addiction?
Well, I would say you have to be very supportive, and don't react when they become verbally abusive or negative, or accuse you of not understanding what's going on, or all the defense mechanisms that people have when they're facing these challenges. They're not prepared to accept any and all support that's available because they deny they have a problem, or the whole gamut of things. And I think, don't take it personal. There were days when I did, and I regret those days. But in the long haul, did I think we did everything? Well, obviously, the end result isn't quite where we'd want it to be. So, did we miss something? Maybe we did, but don't give up. Don't stop trying. Be very supportive as best you can, and let them know that you're there. And when you're ready, and Emily came to her own conclusion that she needed to go to rehab. And it wasn't anything driven by any of us. We obviously suggested it. And she was a very nervous person about going to rehab. She didn't want to spend overnight in rehab. She wanted to stay at home. And so when we took her to the rehab facility, which was a wonderful facility, the whole idea was, well, Emily, let's go have a look. Let's be supportive. And so we went and had a look without any commitment or promise on her part that she would go. We said, Emily, we're going to go for a drive. It's only an hour away. What harm can it do? You're not doing anything. We're not doing anything. Let's go look. And so she went, and, through her own conclusion, she decided that 2 weeks later, she would enter. And the deal at the rehab facility was, you can't come in while you're under the influence. So you need to, in a sense, prove to yourself that you can stay off the drug for a week or two. And so we set Emily to go in, I think it was a Monday or Tuesday after Christmas, because this happened in December. And through her own volition, if you can appreciate, Christmas is a tough time not to be at home with your family and friends. And once you go in, there's no visitation, there's no phone calls, at least in the first week. So going in the week before. So Emily decided, rather than waiting till the week after Christmas, on her own volition, she went in I think the third week of December.
So what role did the family play in regards to her getting set up? Was there like a conversation with the family and Emily to see what program she needs to be on while she's there? What was the family involvement in the process of getting her into the rehab?
Well, Emily has two sisters, and so they obviously, in many cases, knew more about what was going on than her parents did, because it seems sisters are more readily willing to talk to each other than they are to the parents, and I'm fine with that. That's great. And so all they could do is more or less say, Emily, you got to do something. So they would encourage her. And a couple of them, Sarah in particular, spent some time researching facilities that Emily could go to, and Emily consistently rejected those offers because they were too far from home, living here in Ajax. Some of them were in Belleville, some of them were in Guelph, some of them were down Niagara, and Emily just wasn't interested in being that far away. Mm-hmm. So, but they encouraged it to happen. Sarah went to a number of appointments with Emily. Beverly, for a period, helped Emily at Pine Ridge in Oshawa. That wasn't for Emily.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure that it's quite the program that Emily needed. So in the end, I guess June and I researched a facility that was close to home, and by encouragement, took her to see the place with the whole idea and the promise on our part, because Emily had said when we went for the tour, I said, Emily, you got my promise. We're not leaving you there. You know, regardless of what happens, we're not leaving you there. You're not being put in jail. You're not, you know, so it was really a supportive endeavor on our part. And so we took her there. We made sure that she was comfortable with her decision. She also had a dog that had to be dealt with. So we promised to look after the dog for a month. She had a cat that had to be dealt with. You know, she had other responsibilities that had to be dealt with. Who was going to pay her bills when they arrived during the month, and so on. So we as parents, with the support of the kids, the other kids said, all of these things will be looked after. And, you know, so we did all the things that we could do to support her in her effort. So it was a family effort. And in fact, in some cases, she had recently bought a house just before this all happened, and it needed to have the ground floor rooms repainted. So that was all done while she was away, you know, just to kind of make her feel better.
Did you ever have a one-on-one conversation with her about her drug addiction? And what was that conversation like?
Well, let's say there were two conversations, if I can describe them as such. The first centered around the idea that her response was, I don't have a problem, you know, and deny all of those kinds of things. That was very frustrating because she wasn't interested in listening. And to some degree, I think the problem with that conversation is that because she was addicted, she was, I think, consistently under the influence, whether in a great degree or a minor degree. So the conversations didn't work, in my opinion, because her mind was not there. The second and more relevant one was the one that took place early in December, when she finally came around to the idea, raised by her, not by us, that she had a problem and she had to do something about it. And to me, that was the most constructive conversation that we had. And you could tell when you looked at Emily, her health was deteriorating. Emily was, you know, stood about 5'8", attractive woman. She'd lost 35 pounds, you know, and was nothing but skin and bones. I mean, it was, you could just tell that there was something wrong on a health perspective. And she was always a pleasant, outgoing person until she got into the drugs, and she wasn't anymore. You know, it was it was not Emily, and you could just know that. And it took a long time for Emily to realize that she wasn't Emily anymore.
So tell us about that first time when you have a moment alone and you realize that your daughter is gone and she's not coming back. What was that moment like for you?
Well, it was difficult because I guess difficult, but we had a few days to prepare for it because she was in hospital on life support. And so you're always wishful thinking, you're hopeful, but you're being cautioned that it's not not likely to happen. And so we had the opportunity, we were able to gather on the day we made the decision. We were able to gather family and friends to be present. So we had lots of support at that point. And of course, once the decision is taken, then you go through, well, what could I have done? You know, what did I do wrong? What did we do wrong? What did the family, what more could we have done? You go through all that soul searching, and not just her parents, but her sisters, some of her friends, most of her friends. And that soul searching is really difficult. The only thing, I guess, having come out of it, that I'm glad we did, was a grief counseling option available to us, provided by McKechnie Funeral Homes. And we signed up for that about 3 months after the fact. And it was weekly, and it ran for about 10 or 12 weeks. And I got to tell you, anybody that loses anybody for any reason needs to do that kind of thing. It was a tremendous boost to our own personal thinking. It dispelled the idea that we did something wrong. All those thoughts that go through parents' minds, it was really, I think, a positive thing. And it was done, actually arranged by McKechnie's, but was done at Ajax Pickering Hospital in the place where they now do the COVID testing. There's that little building on the side. And so we went there for that. And it was something that everybody should do. It's really beneficial. But, is there, time helps the matter, but it's, the whole idea is you got to get on with your life. And that's not to say we need to forget her, but you can't let your future resolve around the past.
So what's one quick advice you can give to someone who's struggling with addiction?
Oh, first, they're not listening, because if you're struggling, get that help. Find that person that you can trust and talk to them and see how you can work your way through the process. Don't accept that you have to do it on your own. There's lots of support. There's lots of people out there, and find those 1 or 2 or 3 individuals that can help you on that journey.
And it's so important to have the support that you need in such a difficult time. That's all the time we have for today's episode of Health 180 with Carion Fenn. Thank you to Rene for sharing Emily's story and his family's journey with us. Thank you to Susie Scher, and thank you for joining us. And remember, together we're stronger.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
In Canada, only 1 out of 5 children.
Only 1 out of 5 children.
In Canada, only 1 out of 5 children who need mental health